Let's listen now, show. Let's listen now to the story of the resilient journey of what it took to build NACCA and the IFI network from the ground up. There were milestones that shaped impact. We will hear from the pioneers of prosperity and a look at legacy, leadership, and the future that we are now building together. Please welcome Jean Vincent, former NACCA board chair, Elaine Chambers, former NACCA board chair, Shannin Metatawabin, CEO for NACCA, and Keith Matthew, NACCA board chair. Please welcome these incredible leaders to tell us about the journey.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Before we get to a video that we're going to show you, I want to first introduce our panelists. I've had the extreme honor of working with each and every one of these individuals. They are the founders of this network that we're all here to celebrate over these last 2 days. And this network has begun many decades ago, and we're here to understand the story of how it began, why it began, and what the personal stories are. And we can know a little bit about what it takes to build something to this level. In 2019, the OECD, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, that has a membership base of 80 countries, and they highlighted the Indigenous Financial Institution Network as the model for the world to share with other Indigenous groups. We have Jean Vincent. He worked for the National Bank. He was the founder of NACCA and as a GM of SOCA. He's the Vice Grand Chief of his community in 2008 to 2018. So he's also been a chief, board of SOCA, board of AFSCAN, founder of the Native Financial Officers. He's a pilot. I didn't even know about that till I looked him up. And he's on the board for the FMB and the First Nation Market Housing Fund. Elaine is one of the founders of NACCA. She has been GM and CEO for Denene Ventures since the beginning. She's on the board for Kilrich Industries, and she's a chair of CanDo. Keith Matthews, former chief and councillor. On his economic development file, he's done negotiations and brought economic opportunities of lodge, helicopter skiing business. He's been chief negotiator of Kinder Morgan, Canadian Hydro Developments, IBAs, and forest agreements. He's been the chair of the Community Futures Centre, Canadian Emerging Energy Pipelines, National Aboriginal Energy and Power, and a director of the Tulo Centre of Indigenous Economies, and he's also been with CanDo. So I want you to give a good welcome for our panelists today. And before we begin and get into their stories, we have a video message from many of the networks, so we want to play that first.
There was a time, not long ago, when Indigenous entrepreneurs faced significant barriers such as limited access to capital, land, and education.
Our people intended for us to also be prosperous. That was the intent of the signing of the treaties and the sharing of Canada.
They were excluded from this country for generations, marginalized, impoverished through a whole series of government policies and racial discrimination, all the things we know only too well.
It was really difficult to get any type of capital, especially if we're First Nations on reserve.
Mainstream lenders have always been reluctant to lend to Indigenous businesses.
And more importantly, that existing financial institutions and government agencies did not understand Indigenous business.
What made the idea of Indigenous-controlled financial institutions so powerful 30 years ago was we were, as an Indigenous community, we were able to manage our own affairs. It is a form of self-governance in a sense. We are taking control of our own institutions and delivering a well-needed and essential service to our communities.
A lot of the community members were searching for places that they could find access to capital, and they were looking for opportunities to start a business on their own.
It was very difficult for them because there had to be bookkeeping was lax in certain cases. So we had to scale that skill in many of our businesses. And many of the community-based organizations, community-based corporations in the First Nations were tied to the First Nations audits.
And they tried banging their heads against the wall with the major financial institutions in Canada, and it didn't work. They went to the government of Canada. The government of Canada set up policies for investment. But those policies were extremely complicated, extremely slow, and not moving at the speed of business. They're moving at the speed of government, which is a much, much slower enterprise.
It was really important that NACCA form a body that can advocate on behalf of the AFIs to really address the barriers to financing that our Indigenous businesses, individuals really lack.
It is Indigenous organizations that understand the unique challenges and struggles they are facing to promote economic development, not only for their own respective businesses, but also within the context of their communities for which they serve. Bringing together Indigenous businesses under one umbrella allows a transfer of information and knowledge and expertise that allows for the collective benefit of communities and businesses to grow together.
In the mid-1990s, the government of Canada undertook a program review exercise. And what that really meant was they were trying to reduce their expenditure. As a result of that exercise, a number of IFIs had their funding agreements with the government canceled, and this impacted about 1/3 of the IFI network at that time. The IFIs, which are operating autonomously, realized that they needed a unified voice to advocate with government and other partners. So a handful came together to form NACCA, the National Aboriginal Capital Corporations Association.
We'd already been in operation since 1986, about 10 years at the time. We were very successful, and we just felt that a new national organization would mean a loss of our autonomy to do business the way we felt. But we were willing to listen to what they had to say about it. And we went to the meetings. I was at the meeting in Quebec City when the proposal was put forward for forming the organization.
What you have in NACCA is a series of Indigenous financial institutions that understand Indigenous communities. They understand the people, they know the organizations, the land claims organizations, the local governments, and they're able to work with all of them.
NACCA is very important when it comes to Indigenous entrepreneurship. And I think the biggest thing, and something I'm very proud of as a director for NACCA, is that NACCA creates opportunities. It gives entrepreneurs, Indigenous entrepreneurs all across Canada, the opportunity to access capital, to develop and scale up their businesses.
What NACCA and what the Aboriginal Capital Corporations and how the Indigenous financial institutions across the country have created is an opportunity for these entrepreneurs, Indigenous entrepreneurs across the country and their organizations to find ways to create the financial capacity through access to capital.
Indigenous businesses are more than economic drivers. They are paramount in building strong, self-sustaining communities. And NACCA fosters skills in leadership, financial management, and governance to the betterment of the IFIs and the Indigenous entrepreneur.
Indigenous businesses play a huge role in building stronger communities and economies because they create opportunity where it's needed most. Successful entrepreneurs become role models, showing others what's possible and inspiring the next generation. They also bring important values into business, like community sustainability and long-term thinking, which leads to more resilient and inclusive economies. At the end of the day, strong Indigenous businesses don't just build profits, they build pride, independence, stronger futures for our communities.
The goal of NACCA was to build a national network of Indigenous-led IFIs to provide Indigenous entrepreneurs with access to capital, business services, and support. It was about having a strong, unified voice, advocating for the investments and changes to policies to grow Indigenous entrepreneurship.
If NACCA didn't exist today, and without the creation of the IFI network, the Indigenous Financial Institutions, there'd be a huge void in access to capital, access to training, and a support from the networks and organizations that the money flows through.
Through program renovations, the government wanted to out the AFIs. And once we showed them the business case scenario and how much capital was generated and how much business was generated in the country, they invested more capital. And so NACCA has been continuously growing that capital.
As a Director General in the early 2000s, I thought it was very important that we engage with NACCA in an effort to devolve the programming to the organization. I've always felt that it was very important to create Indigenous-led organizations. Indigenous organizations know they client best, can respond to needs. And NACCA, through 30 years of extremely successful partnership with government, has really demonstrated their leadership and effectiveness in reaching this client group.
Every individual or business would have access to capital. And I'm not sure when we started NACCA that we realized the full potential of that statement. But over these many years, we've seen that vision become a reality.
When I think back to the early days and what made me realize something like NACCA needed to exist was maybe less about NACCA, but more about the vision of the leadership back, not just 30 plus years ago, but even beyond that.
So I've been around this network for about 40 years and have had the privilege of knowing many movers and shakers, Elaine Chambers, Muriel Parker, Stephen Morris, Michael Ivey. We were all part of the program renovation, Donnie Miracle, Jean Vincent, and there's so many, Peter Lanton, that come from all across the land.
Every year I read the NACCA annual report and just am amazed at how successful the network has been in getting those much needed dollars, business development dollars, out to communities and to organizations and entrepreneurs in particular.
In fiscal year 2023-24 alone, the network loaned out more than $166 million. That then drove $355 million in labor income, created or maintained over 8,300 jobs, and supported over $600 million in GDP.
When I hear that NACCA has supported tens of thousands of Indigenous businesses, what goes through my mind is the real impact of those numbers and the lives that have been changed. Whether it's an individual entrepreneur or a community, the support from NACCA and the IFI network has been truly transformational in that way.
When I see that NACCA has supported tens of thousands of Indigenous businesses, what goes through my mind is the sheer scale of that impact. That is not a small number. That's national, and it's transformational. And there are real people behind those numbers. Thousands of entrepreneurs, families, and communities.
What excites me most about the future is the confidence and vision the next generation is bringing. Young Indigenous entrepreneurs are stepping forward with strong ideas, with connections to their communities and the ability to move between traditional knowledge and new opportunities.
I'm quite excited about the next generation of entrepreneurs coming up. I feel like they grew up with having more examples in their communities about entrepreneurs that had successes. So I think it made them believe in themselves and made them believe that they could achieve it too.
The success of NACCA is, especially over the 30 years, should be celebrated and should be marked as a momentous occasion. And I'm really proud to be a part of that in the early years.
Well, I think NACCA has come a really long way in its first 30 years. I'm thinking everybody's really excited to see what might happen over the next 30 years for NACCA?
I think in the next 30 years, I think the government has to really recognize the great partnership it has with NACCA and really invest in this institution and Indigenous businesses. The opportunity is only going to get stronger and bigger with major projects on the horizon. And Indigenous people need to be part of those projects, and they need the capital in order to have the scale and scope of the businesses that are required to actually be meaningful partners.
So if I could send a message to Indigenous leaders and entrepreneurs 30 years from now, sort of the same one I would give today, it would basically be, don't wait for permission, do it.
So without NACCA, Indigenous entrepreneurship in Canada would be much less robust, much less successful, and basically stopped in its tracks for another couple of generations.
At the end of the day, they're not just building businesses, they're building pride, independence, and stronger futures for our communities.
Thank you very much. It was great to see all former NACCA people sharing. Everybody's a founder, everybody's a builder. And we got a certain time, and I'm not going to look at that. I'm going to allow you to tell the story. We're here to understand why NACCA was created. We want to understand this is a historical conversation. What was going on at the time? What are some of the stories that you want to share of the businesses, of the communities, of the people that helped grow that? And what were you thinking at the time that made you participate? So I'll start with Jean.
Thank you very much, Shannon. So quickly, very happy to be here today with you and to share some thoughts of the past. But first of all, I would like to say that I don't know why I am here in front of you today, because I think that they should have invited elders or old men, so I was not even born, when NACCA was created. But anyway, so I will try to tell you what I heard from the elders. All right, so in order to keep the focus, so there is so much to say, so I will follow my notes. So my journey with NACCA began in 1986 when I was appointed as Director of Economic Development, Director for my nation, with two mandates. The first mandate was to consolidate an economic development corporation, and the second was to establish a mechanism for accessing capital for entrepreneurs, of which there were about 100 at the time in our territory. We had, at that time, so we had conducted a study that showed the lack of capital for our businesses resulted in reduced growth capacity and lower revenues compared to Canadian companies of similar sectors. Over the next 5 years, we presented two proposals to the federal government, then known as ABC, Industry Canada. The first was a loan guarantee fund with the local credit union, Caisse Populaire des Jardins de Wendake. And the second was an independent financing company. The second proposal was accepted on the conditions that a company be a multinational corporation based in Quebec. Thus, SOCA was born in 1992, and I became its first CEO until 2022, and now I am the chairman of the board of this corporation since that time. It must be remembered that SOCA came into being thanks to the Aboriginal Capital Corporations program, a $200 million program as part of the Indigenous Economic Development Strategy adopted in 1985 by the federal government. Across the country, about 50 companies were set up between the mid-80s and the mid-90s. One point to note, as Dominique Collin mentioned yesterday, is that the federal government didn't believe the AFIs would survive beyond the first 5 years. It's true. Dominic told me that afterwards. And yet we see the result today, over $3 billion in loan made from this initial $200 million put aside. By the way, Dominic Collin, and I want to mention that, has always been one of our champions working for the AFIs. Thank you, Dominic. I know that he left already. But also, I would like to mention some others as well. Michael Rice, that I see in front of me. Michael, stand up, please. A good round of applause, you know. And Jerry Hubner was another one as well, just to name a few. So really on government side, so we had very good champions who helped us very much. In the early 90s, ABC used to invite the AFIs to national meetings once or twice a year. Very quickly, a group of IFIs CEOs began meeting to discuss the opportunity to present a unified voice to the federal government, since we were facing common needs and common problems. I'm thinking of people like John Bauer, Paul Newegg, Clive Dealer, Seif, Kevin Chandilka, who would become the first CEO of NACCA, Elaine Chambers, Lucie Pelletier, just to name a few. And finally, in 1997, we achieved our goal of creating NACCA with a few employees. Initially, NACCA was sort of a secretariat. In my mind, NACCA has gone through three main phases in its life. The first phase, the 90s, was one of implementation and learning. It was during this period that we also began negotiating a whole range of programs aimed at helping entrepreneurs and IFIs. The second phase was more of a consolidation phase, more stable, during which the federal government gradually transferred responsibility for managing the various AEP programs to NACCA. And the last phase, the most recent years, has been a period of intense negotiations that produced two fantastic results in my mind: the signing of a 10-year agreement and the securing of a substantial increased budget of approximately $350 million for 5 years. The other major success is the implementation of IGF, initially with $150 million, with support from the federal government, BDC, EDC, and farm credit corporations, whom I sincerely thank. The NACCA network has improved the lives of many entrepreneurs across the country. Here are two examples from SOCA. The first example relates to our very first client, Martin Obama-Sawin, who needed a bid and surety bond. This was client number one, you know, the first day, first client. At that time, SOCA was equipped to only issue loans. But with our ingenuity and the support of a bank, we provided the crucial bid to our entrepreneur. This client is now a millionaire who invests his money in another company that we created in 2005, AppScan, which capital we use for housing purposes. This is an example of Indigenous money for Indigenous needs. The second case relates to a manufacturer of hardwood stair components. At one point, when the Canadian dollar reached parity with the US dollar, this client's profit plummeted since a large portion of his sales were in the United States. At that time, SOCA took a risk, providing the necessary capital to automate operations and reduce costs. The company has weathered the crisis, and today the company still exists and is thriving more than ever. I've been involved in the world of Indigenous financial institutions for 34 years now, so I could talk about this subject at length, but I will stop here. In conclusion, however, I would say that NACCA is a very good example of an Indigenous-owned and led organizations that works very well. We know our world, we know our market, we know our tools. You can beat doing it yourself. NACCA is a great success we can be proud of, and it's not over yet. There is still a lot of room for growth because the needs of communities and entrepreneurs are increasingly important in the face of new opportunities, particularly in the context of reconciliation.
Thank you very much, Jean. Now I would like to throw it to Elaine. Why NACCA? What was going on at the time? What were some of the barriers you had to deal with? And what's something that you want to leave as a story about NACCA?
Wow. That's a long time, John. We started when we were young and had not gray hair, and now we got grandchildren. So it's when I first I started with DNV in 1987, and at the time, Mark Wedge was the chairperson of Don and I Ventures, and he started going to some meetings because with Henry Watley, and they started a super IFIs because the government was starting to take over. So each IFI put in $5,000 and tried to work together. That failed. Henry used all the money for traveling back and forth to Ottawa, he said. So then at the time, I became general manager in 1996. Mark was sitting on the board of directors of NACCA, and somehow we had alternates. So he went to one meeting, and then he said, I'm sending my alternate, Elaine. So next thing you know, Elaine was going to every meeting and becoming the board of directors. So I always thank Mark to this day. Thank you. At the time, I have a little minute of the meetings that we held at the time. Present, we had Bill Cordy back, Mark Wedge, Alphonse Gersharm, Darlene Watts, Henry Waddeladen, Joe Quinsance, Carol King, Frank Parnell, and Chief Terry Paul. So that was one of the first board of directors back in 1997. Very powerful people that we had coming on and helping us. Some of the other people who then came on was Chief Victor Buffalo, who is very instrumental in our network, and again, the late John Bowers. Some of the chairs that we've had was Donnie Miracle, Alphonse Gersharm, and Darlene Watts were our first co-chairs of the organization trying to start it. So in 1996, we also, when we were formed, BDC, the Native Economic Development Program, at the time who we received, the IFIs received our funding from, tried to amalgamate us with BDC. The people around the table were not going to take that, so that's when the association formed. What we used to always say was NACCA was the best kept secret, the IFIs. So that was one of the things that always sticks with me. As John mentioned, Kevin Shadelka was our first GM. He was out of a little office out of AIIC in Edmonton. And the only way we could fund Kevin was the government did give us a program. It was the Indigenous Youth Business Program. That was the first program that the IFIs were able to deliver, a youth program across the country. And then we started building the Access to Capital program. John and quite a few of them were on a committee on that and trying to structure that. We had many, many GMs meeting, going through the Access to Capital program, the design of the program, how we're going to work with the interest rate buy-down program. I think that took all-day discussion in different sessions to come to consensus with all the GMs of how we were going to do it. We also knew there was always a split between the community futures and the IFIs, because the community futures were restricted to what they could do. The IFIs had autonomy. We had more capital. We were on our own, no government funding once our programs were all done. And then in 2018, again, we started talking with BDC and talking about the Indigenous Growth Fund, because everybody needed capital, and that was the great need. Capital was always the number one thing that we kept looking at and trying to do. And then from that, we expanded from the program expansion. You know, we have the Aboriginal Business Equity Program was a big milestone for us, being XDOs, delivering the program. Then we had the IWE, IYE, our foundation, this forum. And then also, NACCA is now being recognized, which is a big accomplishment. We met with senators. Senators know us. We were recognized in the Senate. We've also met with MPs, ministers, come to our events. So it's been a big thing. Just a couple of weeks ago, we were also recognized in the House of Commons, which is quite a unique thing. So my journey, why I'm still involved with NACCA, it's been part of what I do every day. It's been a success. John and I spent many times going through the policies, procedures, you know, so it's just been part of what I've grown up and been, and it's been something that I've enjoyed. Success is seeing all my clients and what we've accomplished and what we've done. Coming to these events, seeing all the friends and stuff that we've made over the years, and learning from each other. I know some of us are going to be retiring, and there's going to be new GMs coming. So what the future leads is going to be great, more success and more businesses that we can help and be proud of.
Thank you very much. Keith, what's inspired you to be involved in the network? What's your history with the network, and some examples of businesses and people that that have been impacted?
Absolutely. Thank you, Shannon. Is this mic working? Thank you, Shannon. You know, I took a different path to get to where I am today, and I want to pay homage to our leaders today, and Michael Rice, who shared a paper with me, and others in the room who have spent a lot of time building up this incredible institution that we have. And it's been a struggle. I don't know if it's common knowledge in the room, but we're actually legislated out of the Canadian economy. And we've had to battle against the Indian Act and other legislation that has never worked in our favor. And we're changing that actively. You know, we have to. Our people are asking for it, and they need our support, our youth. So for me, I started out on council. I was on council for 10 years. I was a councillor and a chief. We have a lot of former chiefs in the room as well. I want to thank them for being a part of the network. Councillors as well. And I had the economic development portfolio for my community. So I found out in a hurry that a couple of things when I went to, we developed a MOU with Mike Wiggly helicopter skiing in our territory. And the MOU led to discussions about how we could become involved in the operation of the heli skiing company. And they said, we're going to build a brand new lodge, $7 million. This is in the early 2000s. And we went to our bank, I won't say their names, and asked for a $3.5 million loan. And my community didn't have a strong balance sheet. We didn't have an economic development corporation at arm's length, you know, that was being talked about at the time. And our bank said no, because they were first on another operation in southern BC, and it was involved in casinos. Went sideways, and the risk profile for First Nations at that time was, it wasn't favorable. You know, and we got turned down. There were fires in 2003 in our nation, and we had a logging operation. We were salvage loggers, so we took advantage of the fires. We made a healthy sum of money from salvage logging. We used that for our down payment, and ever since then, we've done very, very well. We created our own institution in my community, and the other things that I learned along the way, and important people in my journey to where I am today, is some of the OGs that are in the room, but more importantly, some of the OGs that aren't here. And one of the people that had a really big influence in the central interior of British Columbia was Jerry Collins. She's not here today. She's gone. And there's a few people in the room who got their start at Community Futures, and I'm one of them. Another is our chair, Mike Labordi. Mike, can you put your hand up, please? He's got the cowboy hat here. He was one of our original lending officers, banker, and I got my start as a self-employment assistant in the self-assistance program. And I worked my way up through the ranks. You know, I had my own business and learned about how to manage that business effectively, you know, and she was a great influence. So she asked me to join the board. I've been on that board for almost 30 years. It's been a long time, holy smokes. So, you know, you asked about people that have helped shape my influence. It was Jerry for sure, and others in the room. And I'm quite fortunate on the path I've been on. It's been a wonderful experience. And there's others in the room that I'm sure that had a huge influence as well, but those are the people for me. And you know, that self-employment assistance program, it really helped out. There's people in my community. One of them was my nephew. He's a multimillionaire. He got his start with the program. And I want to mention to the youth that, you know, this stuff is all possible, you know, and we're training our youth today to take over what we have learned. We're here as a resource. Please reach out to us, and we'll do the best we can to help you, guide you on your path, and avoid some of the pitfalls that maybe we've made. But I need one last the story. So my family, we have about 500 acres of land in my res, and we borrowed money from Farm Credit. And this is not a knock on Farm Credit, but we borrowed quite a sum of money. We ended up paying over $1 million back, and this is back in the early 80s when the interest rate was around 18%. So anyone who is currently borrowing money from our IFIs and pays, you know, 6 to 8%, and I know those are fairly conservative numbers, but there were times in the history of our communities where we're paying exorbitant sums of money, and I'm happy to report that we paid off our Farm Credit loan, and it took us several years, but I had to dip into our other funds to do that, but it's all worth it, you know, and it's been quite a ride. NACCA is poised for incredible success, you know, and I have no doubt when I retire that our young people are going to take this on, and they're going to do fantastic. They're going to take it to the next level, which in my mind is creating our own source revenues and own source, you know, wealths, and not having to depend so much on outside, you know, government agencies to support us. And that's my dream. I hope that we can do that. And we've come a long ways. You know, you've heard from both the leaders up here how far we've come. It's never been easy, but anything worth doing is never easy either. And it's been a heck of a ride, and we still have a long ways to go. Cookstown.
So for the panelists, a few minutes, if you could speak to if NACCA has achieved what you originally envisioned, for the next 30 years, what do you hope to see? And do you have some advice for a leader that you wish you had when you were young?
Yeah, so thank you. So very quickly, first of all, I think that we should acknowledge that we built a lot over the last 30 years, but I would say that there is as much to build over the next 30 years. And in fact, my wish is that maybe if we could count on successors, young leaders to replace us in the future, and then just to continue this journey. And I would like, as a matter of fact, I would like to acknowledge our general manager at SOCA now, Olivier Gilsoui. Where is Olivier? Olivier, the back of the room. We hired Olivier not so many years ago, and he was young, and he was working for ISC at that time. And finally, we hired Olivier, and he decided to come to us and to work with us. And now he became a great leader, and I would say that Olivier represents the future. And he replaced me on the NACCA board. I'm very proud of it. So, and yes, and I think that there is a lot of space for NACCA to grow in the future. And we're talking also about structuring projects in the future. I sit, among others, I sit on the First Nations Financial Management Board, where we're talking about setting up an Indigenous Development Finance organizations, kind of a development bank for First Nations. But we will make sure that NACCA will keeps its space in those future developments. So, and I would say that the past has been very good, but I see the future as maybe being brighter than the past. Thank you very much.
It's been a long haul, but it's been well worth it. I think we become a lot stronger as IFIs, and we just keep building stronger and stronger. So the future, I think we will be a really strong organization. We'll be the go-to organization that everybody will be recognized. We'll have enough capital where we don't have to keep going and fighting for more capital and fighting for our space and stuff. I think we'll be recognized out there. And there's going to be a new whole generation change. I know a lot of the old GMs are going to be retiring, like we heard from Rocky Sinclair on there, Don Madabi, Brian Davey. Jean is already retired from his IFI. So, you know, it's been a lot of growing pains, but I think the future is going to be bright, a lot more businesses. We're going to be a lot prouder and be able to use all of our Indigenous businesses and export and be able to grow, especially our youth, our future leaders.
We've come a long ways in 30 years, and I think I relayed a couple of stories about my experience, and I think what we have to do is look to the future and look at other areas that in British Columbia we have a strong land back component and a lot of court cases and stuff like that. And the reason I'm saying that. It's like when the dog is chasing the car, you actually catch the car, you don't have the skills to drive the car. It's a res dog analogy. But what I'm trying to say is that if we look to the future, we need to see where the opportunities are and build our own institutional development, have the skills to actually manage those new opportunities, build up our youth, make sure that we've always focused on what's at home and looking after our client bases, which is our entrepreneurs, our IFIs, and anticipating where those needs are going to be because of what we're doing, what our politicians are doing to advance the cause. And I think we've been very, very successful at doing that. And I want to thank the past leadership for their vision and courage and all the things that they bring to the table and help us escape that welfare trap in our communities and really help our people where they need the help the most. And I also see one other thing. I've got 23 seconds. So I think part of our future is our one out in other countries. You know, New Zealand, all those Commonwealth countries that have been impacted by colonialism, we need to help them with our experience so we can be good and great together and stand each other up. You know, those are the words of my ancestors when we met with Sir Wilfrid Laurier back in 1910. We told them in British Columbia, here's how we want to resolve the land issue. They ignored us. Sir Robert Borden came in through it all the work that we did, you know, and then they ask, well, how come this stuff hasn't been settled? Well, we have the answers for you. Come and talk to us. Come and talk to us. Meet with us. Meet with us with good hearts. And the international development I'm talking about, some of the people are in the room today. We need to expand on that and help each other. We really do. So thank you, Shannon. Thank you to the other leaders here. You're all OGs, man. I bow down to you. You're good people. I love you so much. Kukstem.
Love you too. Couldn't have said it better myself. But I want to, before we end, this is a very special panel. If there's any questions from the audience, this is like a historical thing. We're talking about the story of NACCA. Is there anything that really stands out as a question that needs to be answered right now? We filled up your buckets. Okay, thank you to the panelists, Keith, Elaine, Jean. Thank you very much. Thank you.
That was it. That was the panel that opened the waterworks for me. Thank you so much to our panelists, Elaine Chambers, Shannin Metatawabin, the youth member, Jean Vincent, and of course, Keith Matthew. That was a very historic panel. And just before we break for lunch, as I opened this morning, I talked about how long it took for me to return to the language journey with my own mother. And the reason it took that long, why would it take that long to be able to learn directly from someone who was fluent in Dunk-A Koshe? And I will tell you, it's because she was involved in a lot of this as well. Her work, I come from big women. My mom did a lot of work. She was the first chairperson of our First Nation, the Taanquichan Council. She then became the Grand Chief of the Council of Yukon First Nations. Before she left this world to do her work in the spirit world, she was a board member of Northern Vision Development. And for a long time in my own life, I have struggled with reconciling the time it took away from our family and that traditional knowledge transfer. But when I look at this room, when I look at the panel that we just witnessed, I understand. I know what we've had to do and what we had to exchange for this to happen. And I say, okay, all right. These are the conversations and the stories that aren't known in the non-Indigenous world. And so to our leadership in this room today, yes, we do have a lot of work yet, but you've laid the foundation for us. And it is a good foundation. You did not build financial institutions. You built us a future. Queshro Nithi. So with that, I will allow you now to break for lunch. Nimat.